what are the things that you do want to do? Or what are the things that you do want to be able to achieve?
I want to be an example of success in this fashion. I just want to be able to inspire others to take action to create the kind of lives that they want to live. Super tight family, tight-knit family, a really great friend group that I consider to be like an extension of my family. So just doing things that shows them like there's nothing you can't do.
Welcome to Season 2 of the VIRIVERSE Live podcast. Before we get into our Mindful Minute to help you transition from what you were just doing into this conversation, a branch from the tree of transparency. The designer's wife makes an appearance on the mic as she was having a super important work call of her own. And this raises the questions, what work from home struggles have you experienced in the past couple of years? And can we embrace these struggles to solidify stronger than ever partnerships with our loved ones going forward? Okay, off to the Mindful Minute. Enjoy. Hello, everybody. Chance here, also your designer, and I'd like to welcome you back into VIRIVERSE, the place where changemakers come to unlock a balanced soul and scale positive impact. Last week, our changemaker had this very tough global topic, something that connects us all, yet disconnects us all, and it's hard to know exactly what to do about it. We were left with a few questions carry us forward. How does an individual bend rather than break when everything around us seems to be falling apart? And how can humanity do this very same thing? How do we respond to the brokenness of the world when we're just one person? So once again, we're being led forward by our Kusada Moon mentor, the present squirrel, to keep the conversation going forward.
Yeah, thanks, Chance. And hey, everyone, I'm MCK, aka the Present Squirrel. Bounce is a tool created to help entrepreneurial changemakers just like you to make better decisions faster without second guessing yourself, even if you're a chronic overthinker, which we all might have a little bit of experience with. And so before we jump in, for those of you who have yet to experience Bounce, the anonymous changemaker and I are going to have a 20-minute conversation where they will be open and honest about a situation that's top of mind for them. I'll simply be a great listener and ask them a series of good questions. Now, in our audience today, we have a couple of other changemakers who will be observing the conversation and offering their biggest insight and their biggest question at the end. So, without any further ado, let's get started. Hey, changemaker, you ready to get going?
Yes, I am.
All righty then. 1, 2, 3. So, what's on your mind?
So the topic that's been on my mind is something that has been on my mind since about the top of the year, and that is integration, specifically integrating the shadow. That's something that's been on top of mind because last year, I would say about second half of last year, I went through an experience that I can describe as a bit of an ego death. So at this point in my life, going through a period of reconstruction. So now I'm at that phase of reconstruction where I'm looking at what's needed, what's not needed, and looking at some of the things I may have discarded or don't know even exist, and seeing where that fits um, in the present moment.
Yeah. So, can you tell me more about the shadow?
As I understand it, it's not necessarily bad. It's not necessarily what it is, or at least as I interpret it. The shadow is just unknown, or it is just infinite. As yeah, as I understand it, or at least as I interpret it, that's what the shadow is to me.
Yeah. And so, when you think about integrating something like this, I mean, what's the best way to start?
That is a good question. I think a great place to start is probably the end, or where do I want to be as an individual? My personal life, professional life, um, where do I want my relationships to be, both interpersonal, um, like connections, things of that nature. Um, where do I want my mind to be? Where do I want um, my soul to be? Where do I want all of these things to be? To get an ideal picture, or a picture of what the ideal outcomes will look like for those things, I think is where I would need to start in order to get a good idea of what the path forward looks like.
Hmm. So, I guess these are all specific categories, I guess, within the whole of, let's call it your life. What do you think is the larger where you want to be answer?
That's something that I'm still I'm still trying to narrow down myself, because we all got, we're all human, right? We all want um, peace, happiness, tranquility. We all want good fortune for ourselves as well as others. Um, but I guess that's probably like the big picture sort of desire. Um, I'd have to be honest. I'd be lying if I said I had one answer to that question. Um, yeah, that's something that I'm not too sure at the moment.
Yeah, which is totally okay. I mean, it's a big topic. So, I guess when thinking about the personal, the professional relationships, your mind, your soul, like these kinds of things, what in the absence of knowing sort of that larger goal, what do you think is the best way to kind of, I guess, bind these things to something? Or I guess when you think about these categories, maybe the better question is, which of these categories do you feel like you have clarity on now
Hmm.
in terms of that ending space that you're thinking about?
I would have to say the soul. Um, Again, as I understand it, it's not something that I bring up or say lightly. I believe that it is like the soul is like, um, like your inner kingdom, but it's also like the magnetic field, right? And connected to that, I got my mind, which is like the compass. So looking at these things, at least the way that they're organized, I feel like if my soul is in a good place, or if I feel like the things that I'm doing, things that I'm involved with, kind of feed that. Uh, I think everything else from there kind of, so I guess it's, yeah. So everything else kind of falls into place when that's in alignment, or I should say, things are a lot easier to align when when the magnetic field is strong, or when I have a lot of confidence in it.
So I think the question that's coming up for me a little bit is it sounds like mind and soul are kind of like in a category, and then personal, professional, and relationships are like a category. Almost like, and I think the thing that's coming up for me, it's almost like a, chicken or egg situation. Like, is it trying to put personal, professional, and relationships, in a good place, which feeds into the mind and or the soul or the compass or the magnetic field? Or is it like the mind and the soul, which by getting those contribute to the personal, professional relation? Like, do you see those also as similarly as a couple of different categories, or like how do you see those potentially relating to each other?
It's funny you bring that up because that's something that I've juggled with in my mind, and it's almost like pointing a mirror at a mirror. Um,
Hmm.
so, and to kind of give a little bit more context as to why I look at it this way, or why I look at that, those two concepts in that manner, is because, um, like, I would say, like, I guess most ambitious people, or at least what I consider myself to be the person with high aspirations, but as a person who was in the past was very ambitious, things that motivated me, or some of the things that I sought to attain, no longer interest me now. Um, Material gain and material success is something that no longer drives me. So I'm not ashamed that it did in the past, but I'm glad I'm at a point where those things no longer have um, that big of a hold on me. So with that, it has me. I'm reevaluating. Um, I guess I'm reevaluating the. I guess the where some of the. I guess where some things currently rank in my life, in regards to things in my professional life and things in my professional life. Um, if if I had to answer the question, I would say, if like to the chicken egg approach, I really think it starts with self before it even gets into anything in like anything that deals with commerce or my vocation, um, because that'll always be there in some form. Um, but I've learned that some of the things that I may take on may do more harm than good. I may receive a benefit in the short term or in the short run, but in the long term, the sacrifice may not be worth it.
Hmm. What would be an example of something like that?
When you're running a company or a business, or as an entrepreneur, opportunities come up um, when you're good at your craft. Opportunities come up with a wide array of people, wide array of individuals from all different walks of life and backgrounds, and your values may not align with everyone.
Mm.
But in the past, I've let I would call a misalignment. I wouldn't let that deter me from going after the opportunity, because what I saw or what I thought would be on the other side of that, accomplishing that. So an example would be maybe doing business with someone who didn't have the greatest reputation, but it wouldn't be a concern of mine because I thought, well, I'm an honest individual. I'm an accountable person. Someone I believe, or the people I've been blessed to be around, is you're honest, you're courageous, you're wise, you're all these things. I, the ego, I would say, because I believed I was those things. That doing work with that individual wouldn't harm me, and in fact would probably change them. Um, but it ended up turning into a situation where it was just a lot of lessons that were learned, And the lessons that were learned was this all could have been avoided if you trusted your gut and trusted, because you were honest, courageous, wise, that you don't have to take this opportunity. Other ones will be out there. I guess not having a fear of missing out, that sort of thing.
Cool. So we're just a little bit over 10 minutes right now. How is this conversation going and how are you feeling?
I'm feeling like I don't know if you ever. I've never really watched the show either, but it's like this show on A&E where it's like people have like a whole bunch of stuff in their house, like the hoarders or something. Yeah, the hoarders, like that show. And, like the people come through and they like clean everything out for them, and it's like they have a whole new like perspective on like their living space and like even themselves. Like they're a completely different individual at the end of it. So I feel like right now we're in the process of throwing out a lot of things that have been that I didn't even realize took up that much space in my mind.
Hmm.
So I'm really thankful.
Yeah. And has there been a question or a moment so far that's been particularly helpful or useful?
Um, the question on organizing, or at least ranking, where the things that I am attempting to prioritize, like where do they rank with the professional things in the professional space and the things in the personal space? Which one would take precedent? 'Cause that's something that's been I've been juggling back and forth between a bit.
Excellent. So I love this kind of parallel you drew with hoarders, and that's like such an interesting way, I think, to think about this. Um, so, what corner of your thoughts should we start to organize and tackle next? Because it seems like there's like a few different things, that we kind of got going. So, what's your thought on where we might want to go next with this?
I would say with the reorganization of everything, I would like to continue down the path of exploring how should I put it? Exploring redefining success, or even like going through this process of redefining what success is.
Hmm.
Um, I think that's something that, again, that's something I'm still currently building out. So I really love to, yeah, I'd love to get your feedback on some of those things.
Well, so okay, when it comes to redefining success, I mean, I also know that you were saying that, these things start with ourself.
Yeah.
So one thing that I was also wondering about too is that when it comes to, getting your soul right, or uh I don't know, or like I guess like strengthening that magnetic field kind of as you were talking about a little bit,
Mhm.
is that I guess which one comes first? Is it important to talk about the soul and the magnetic field, because then that will help move towards what that definition of success is, or do we start with the definition of success, which informs us what to do to build up your soul, or think about where you want to build your soul to get to that success?
Um, I think we definitely start with the definition.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what do you think the definition is at this point?
At the foundation of it would, I would say, would be not having to sacrifice self-respect
Hmm.
for short-term gain, or long-term for any kind of gain. Not having to sacrifice self-respect. Um, Again, the material success is it'll come, it will go, but it's not something to cling on to,
Hmm.
because people do dangle that in front of that. That's the carrot, right?
Hmm.
Um, so I guess not being susceptible to people dangling carrots. Yeah, I think that would be the definition of just not putting myself in a position where I'm sacrificing self-respect.
Hmm. And so I noticed that's kind of like things that you don't want to do. But what are the things that you do want to do? Or what are the things that you do want to be able to achieve?
Um, I want to be able to be. I want to be an example of. I want to be an example of success. Um, in this fashion, I just want to be able to inspire others to take action to create the kind of lives that they want to live. Um, Super tight family, tight knit family. A really great friend group that I consider to be like an extension of my family. So just doing things that shows them um, like there's nothing you can't do. That's pretty much like the core of what's motivating me at this point right now. Um,
Hmm. So being able to motivate others, be an example for the people who are closest to you, with the underlying, feeling that, there's nothing that you can't do.
yeah,
And I know that, material success isn't the thing that, is like the number one thing. I guess where does it fit in this though? Because of course, for you to be able to motivate others, for you to be an example, for you to do those things, there are probably certain material things that are important, even to that mission. What do you think
yeah,
those are?
absolutely. Um, I would say, and not to say that like in a way where like I judge others that do that do like buy nice things like nice clothes, jewelry, watches, stuff like that, cars, like vacations, things of that nature. Like I think that's something that I don't think that's anything to be ashamed of or not want to go after. I guess because I'm coming from a family background where there was lack, so anything you did have, you appreciated it that much more.
Hmm.
So my relationship to wanting that kind of material gain, like the big house, the cars, vacations, and things of that nature, they were coming from a place of lack.
Hmm.
And now operating from more, or trying to operate more consciously from a place of abundance. I think for me, it would all have to. I think again, as long as it fits within the framework where I don't feel like my self-respect I- is is at odds of what I've obtained. It's like, yeah, to be completely clear, like, yeah, I would love a house, like a nice home in the mountain in Jamaica. I would love that. Um, my dream car, I would love to have a '97 M3 coupe. Like I would love to have that. I think for me, where material success sits is I would say, you know what, I would say it like this. The barrier to entry, right? If that's the reward for the labor, reward for the suffering, um, the barrier of entry for those things are just going to be a little bit higher. So the obtaining it isn't necessarily the issue for me at this point, or I don't think it was an issue. But I think getting those things, knowing that there's so many things that you can do, or there's so many things um, that could be done in order to obtain them. Um, I think for me, it's just limiting the scope of what could or will be done to obtain those things is just where material gain sits for me right now. So yeah, well, I guess it's kind of had a breakthrough right there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we've just hit 20 minutes. So, based on what we've talked about, what would you like to do or what would you like to try next?
Um, yeah, I think I just at this point I would just love to hear everyone's feedback. going through my journey, I've spoken to people who this is not something that's uncommon. This is something that other people have gone through as well. So I would just love to hear either other people's experiences or other people's feedback on the topic.
And you definitely will. You'll get the insights and some questions, but imagine that none of us are here, right? Imagine this is you walking away from this conversation. If you were to walk away right now, I mean, you just said you're like, oh, I think that was a breakthrough. So when it comes to this topic that we're talking about, what do you want to do or what do you want to try to keep you moving on this pathway to better identifying or clarifying or understanding how to integrate?
That's a good question. I think I'll just start with like what we talked about before is just I guess taking time to write down, okay, like where does everything rank? Where does everything sit? Just write all that down so I can see it in front of me. And then from there, um, just kind of go through a reorganization process. That particular moment where I felt like I had a breakthrough is that some things like visualization, like vision, like those type of things. Like I'm a big person on that. I know other people are big on that as well. I was always a bit uncomfortable visualizing myself with some of the things that I would like to have because I felt like it was in conflict with um, or a regression or a repeating of some of the things that led me to those particular situations in the past because those were kind of at the forefront. But going through that or going through this conversation, I think what I want to do is just kind of sit down, like, yeah, like, all right, for this to happen, right, there's just nothing wrong with having this. If we wanted to obtain this, okay, now with this new lens that I have, what would need to be done in order to obtain that? And then I think from there, I'll probably be able to build out a solid roadmap of what I want the next couple of months or next couple of years to look like.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being so open and honest and for sharing your situation with me.
No, thank you for being a great listener, and thank you all for having me on.
I know that those 20 minutes went by super quick. There's a lot of information in there, and our brains process things in different ways and at different speeds. So before we move into observer insights, MCK and I'd like to invite you to just take 2 minutes and kind of write down any additional observations, insights, questions that might come to mind.
Yeah. And, if you're a bit like me and you were ferociously taking notes, you can also take the next 2 minutes to go back over your notes and circle the things that really stood out to you. Or you can do both. And afterwards, we are going to have our observers share their biggest takeaway and the one question that they'd most like to ask today's anonymous changemaker. So our 2 minutes starts now. All right, it's about 1 minute gone, 1 minute to go. 15 seconds. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, we're done.
Let's move into our kind of sharing is caring part of the conversation today. So the researcher is actually going to kick us off with her biggest insight and most top of mind question for today. Your challenge, 30 seconds or less. Over to you, friend.
Thanks, Chance. Oh my goodness, 30 seconds. Okay. This conversation just feels so relevant to the work that change makers are doing. I feel like shadow work and integration are both so important. If we as individuals and collectively as humanity are going to tackle the meta crisis we're facing, I think integrating the shadow requires that we make friends with all the parts of ourselves, especially the parts we judge as unacceptable or even unlovable. So my question to the anonymous changemaker would be, how can you cultivate or find ways to practice self-acceptance and self-love in your life, especially during difficult or challenging times? Back to you, Chance.
Yeah, what a question for the road ahead. Wow. Okay. Well, we have some new friends with us today as observers. The symbiotic is hanging out. What did you find in the conversation, and what question would you like to leave with our anonymous changemaker for the day?
Well, to begin with, there was like this two words that caught me right from the beginning, and I think I still need to do some research on it. And it's basically just shadow integration, and of course, like for me, is trying to understand this a little bit more. And from the conversation, what I got is basically just no matter the results, never fail on putting yourself first. And the question that I would like to ask to the anonymous changemaker is, from your own personal experiences dealing with ego, what advices would you give to people that struggle with saying yes to all opportunities?
All right. Popcorn style, on we go over to the perspective.
Hello, hi everyone. It is beautiful yet disrupting of one's worldview to be experiencing this type of transformation. My one question is there a risk in your mind to focusing on the soul rather than on the personal professional?
Oh, the work continues. Wow. Okay. Well, designer here. So share my takeaway. It's really interesting, this interweaving of not sacrificing self-respect on the path to success on terms that align with our values, while also being willing to sacrifice a bit of the material things in life that clutter our lives and make it harder to live life the way that aligns with our values. This feels like a really sustainable mindset, but also a complicated formula. So I think the question that I would ask is, early on, you mentioned this idea of a compass that can help you navigate this kind of magnetic field of the soul. The question would be, what is that compass? What does it do for you? How does it help you wayfind? What are some of the tools and practices and things that that compass can allow you to do to examine this? So, Present Squirrel, what were your insights as we went along, and do you have any questions on your side left to get out there?
Yeah, thanks, Chance. And thanks to all the rest of those insights and questions from all the other observers. It's pretty powerful. My biggest takeaway from today, I think, is about the hoarding, actually. Like, I love that moment where, sort of like describing this experience being like the TV show Hoarders, and how people get a whole new perspective on their space, and relating that, I think, to the clutter, the things that you're experiencing in your mind. I thought that was really powerful for me. And I think the question that I would ask goes back to something that our anonymous changemaker said at the very, very beginning. It's just what's needed and what's not needed. So I think I just want to reflect that one back, because I think that was a question that I wanted to ask at one point, but I didn't really know where to find the space for that. So that's all for me. Back over to you, Chance.
Yeah, so as our conversation today comes to a close, for all of you that have been listening in, if your interest is piqued by today's bounce conversation and you have a desire to gain a little bit greater clarity and make better decisions faster in your life, MCK has been putting together a trifecta of prompts and exercise that you can go through. So if you'd like to jump into that, join our VIRIVERSE email experience at linktree/viridescent. That'll be posted in your show notes as well. And you'll receive prompt 1 of 3 after you sign up.
All right. And before we wrap, Anonymous Changemaker, thank you again for being part of today's conversation and for being so open and honest with your situation. One last question for you. What do you think has been the most valuable thing for you in today's conversation?
Thank you, everyone, for the feedback. I think the most valuable thing from today's conversation, honestly, has just been getting someone outside of myself to ask these questions. I think that the moment where we were talking about where does everything rank in relation to things regarding like the soul versus like the personal or professional relationships, that helped me kind of get a better idea of like how I view things. So I think the conversation as a whole was really great because again, it's just always it's not too often you get to get out of your head with these particular subjects. So I would just say just yeah, the conversation as a whole has been really great. But if I had to pinpoint it down to one thing, it would definitely be the part where we kind of get to the decluttering, like that particular point of the conversation.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that.
All right, so as we jump aboard the Viridescent mothership and depart the moon for this week, for anyone that is listening today or on the podcast, if you want to take a more active role from the moon of QSADA, we would love to invite you to become an observer and participate in the conversation. You can find that in your show notes. Lastly, thank you just for joining us and helping us support a change maker just like you. See you all next week. This is your Vera Vigilantes signing out with a little nature experience as always. Later, friends, and be well.